Hello and welcome to Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. I'm your host, Will Bachman, and I'm excited to be here today with my friend Vijay Mehra, who is former KKR. He was former McKinsey Digital Labs, and we're going to talk today about a case example that illustrates the Agile methodology applied in real life. Vijay, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Will. Good morning.
And it's great to be chatting with you, sitting in Singapore today. I'm here in New York. Vijay, tell us about the case example you're going to walk us through.
Yeah, sure. Firstly, great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. The case I'm going to talk about is one from Southeast Asia. Our client was a legacy bank in the region that wanted to go digital, and typically developing new products in the banking service line would take anywhere from 9 to 12 months. And they wanted to see what they could do in terms of penetration in a new market. And the time frame they'd given us was 3.5 months. So we broke the problem statement down into a number of different areas. We worked in parallel with part of the internal banks team and our own strategy team to figure out, market segment analysis and profitability and where the sort of juice for the digital bank is going to come from, and then we got to work to actually deliver the product. Now, delivering the product was difficult because we didn't know what the white spaces were in terms of what the market needed. This was a communist country. This was a country where local banks already existed, and we were a foreign bank coming into that country from the digital side. So we did a number of hackathons in a couple of the big cities. We did these, and what a hackathon is in a very short period of time, typically 24 to 48 hours, a lot of ideation is done, a lot of design thinking is done to quickly put together some sort of a workflow in terms of customer journeys, in terms of the visuals of what a feature would look like on a digital banking app, and play it back to an audience, play it back to a focus group, play it back to folks online, get critique, get the prototype quite extensively critiqued to then figure out, how are people thinking, how are people making their decisions, what are they seeing when we share the prototype in front of them, what emotive response are they actually generating within themselves, and how do they then make decisions whether to want to open an account with that bank or not. And so based on that work, we developed a number of personas to figure out, is this a country where digital banking should go first with retail banking or supporting the SME segment, or is it a mixture of both? And based on what we found out from the hackathons and from the personas that were developed from the hackathons, we found three things that the market wanted that was currently not available. The first was for the small, medium enterprise. Getting loans was extremely difficult. These are people who have small shops or small businesses of their own. They typically have some collateral that's worth something, but they're not able to get approval, and the process of getting approval is highly paper-driven and very cumbersome, very bureaucratic. So on the digital side, what we did is we ideated, if with these focus groups to figure out if we were able to deliver a digital banking journey for the SMEs, but this sort of a approval for a small loan for trade finance or for helping the small business grow can be provided provisionally. That is a provisional approval within 5 or 10 minutes, subject to further verification of documents. If this was done, would this be a market that could grow in the country? And lo and behold, the persona mapping that we did said, yes, this can be done. This is something that is a pain point and is not actually supported by any of the local banks.
Okay, so a question for you here. So who was participating in this hackathon? Was this employees of your client? Was this college students, random people off the street? Who was participating in this hackathon?
Yeah, great question. So we segmented the hackathons, just looking at the way the banking industry is segmented naturally. We segmented the hackathons to the retail side and the SME side. And on the retail side, we had a mixture of college students, millennials, and then mid-level and senior managers as well. And what we saw is, the things that they go to the bank for are very different. And then similarly on the SME side, We segmented the SMEs by a couple of sectors that were most sort of voluminous in the country, and looked at developing personas, in line with those sectors. What we found was really interesting. On the retail side, the college students and the younger profile people, they wanted to have a digital bank for aspects of ease of use. When they went out to a restaurant, they wanted to divide the bill equally or as they wished, but very easily between friends, etc. And some of them had this notion that when I want to send money, I don't want to have to put in all the banking information and the SWIFT code and all of this stuff. I just want to send it on a mobile number, from a mobile number to a mobile number. And the SMEs had a different set of criteria that they were looking for. They wanted to be able to have access to trade finance. They wanted decisions to be done more quickly. They wanted their unmonetized collateral. That is, they have a small shop, they have a home, they have a piece of agricultural land. The big banks wouldn't look at those as monetizable, but they had inherent value. So they wanted to see if there's a new player in the market that would actually look at those assets, and through a combination of information on the asset itself and some big data analysis in terms of their own spending patterns, would they be eligible for a loan? And that's exactly what we did. So we looked at credit bureau information. We looked at we mined some data in terms of social media and profiling, figure out, is this a risky SME that one should not give the loan to? And then, of course, that was just for the provisional approval. The actual approval was done after looking at all the documents and checking the authenticity and making sure that the risk was in line with what the bank's risk was, risk profile acceptability was, and only then the loan was given. But the entire process was shortened, and this really took off in the country because SMEs had never had the opportunity to be able to log on to a digital bank for the first time within 5 minutes, and then apply for a loan within 10 or 15 screens, input basic information on their business, and get an answer whether or not they're eligible for provisional loan approval, and then have a mobile banker. One part of the app was we found as part of the persona development that they wanted convenience. So one part of the app we developed was to have a mobile banker actually go to their location and pick up the documents that would then give the eventual approval. And so this was a service that A, was much appreciated, and B, would open up a real new niche in that country that had not been serviced by anyone before.
So how did you get people to actually participate in these hackathons? I mean, if, I don't know, some foreign bank came to New York and said, would you like to come to an all-day session, like a 24-hour marathon session, and help us generate ideas? I would say, well, no. You could pay me, but no. I mean, so was there like a prize at the end? Was it just glory or a scholarship, or just paying people to participate, or how did you recruit people, and how do you know that they're going to be like smart people to participate? So who got invited, and what was their incentive for trying to come and do a good job?
Yeah, great question. So it was a combination of a little bit of carrot and incentive, and also need driven by lead users. So on the SME side, when we first did an online survey to figure out, are these problems that we think, as an initial hypothesis, are emerging problems? Are these really relevant in the SME space? So what we found is a number of SMEs, responded in a way that helped us profile them as potential sort of lead user SMEs, and they participated voluntarily. And then for the kids on the retail side, not really kids, but the younger profile on the retail side, we had some incentives, some prizes, some iPhones and stuff like that. So a combination of both. Not all the work is done through the 24-hour cycle with everybody in the room. So the initial ideation and the development of the personas and the empathy maps, yes, that is done with everybody in the room. The actual development of the working prototype and figuring out how to lay out the journeys and and so on. This is done by a combination of the digital lab devs and the UX UI designers. And then the playback is done the next day with the audience. So we try and make sure that when we have third parties participating in this, especially at a relatively sort of scaled sense, that it's not too burdensome in terms of their schedule. So it's more like 8 to 12 hours of their time, and then our team is doing the 24-hour turnaround.
Got it. Okay. So let's fast forward a little bit. So you do the one with the subject, the small and medium enterprises, and an idea emerges, a hypothesis that an app or the digital tool that would allow people to get provisional approval in 5 to 10 minutes would be a great thing. Walk me through that process of how you develop that, and sort of what were the agile principles you were using, and what did that look like? Building some kind of minimal viable product quickly to show it to people, et cetera. So walk me through that process.
Yeah, great question. So the tip of the process is led by design thinking, and the tip of design thinking is to really figure out how people behave and how they make decisions based on what they're seeing, what they're hearing, what they're feeling, and a little bit about their environment. So the landing of the insight that it's inconvenience and it's inaccessibility, and there are actually elements of collateral that these SMEs have, but that they're not having the opportunity to get them monetized or get them even reviewed by the larger players. All of these items were insights that emanated from the empathy maps that we developed based on the interviews and based on the participation of the SMEs in the first part of the hackathon. The principles of Agile that these map back to are essentially three of the 12 that really stand out. One is the idea is to come up with a solution that is a working solution. Now, whether it's a working app or it's a clickable prototype on a hackathon, it's still an end product. It's an end product that somebody can touch and feel, and a representative of the market or representatives of the market can react to. And that's one of the key founding principles of Agile, to prioritize the delivery of an end product versus focusing on processes and tools. We always want to try and focus on delivering working software or working prototype, and frequently. The second principle of Agile that was really essential to get right in these hackathons was one of adaptability. And in Agile, the focus is on quick pivots, small pieces of work, and the ability to quickly change and adapt to changing circumstances and changing requirements. And this is happening constantly in the hackathon, because what you think is important, in the first half an hour is going to be not necessarily the same in the second hour or the third hour, based on how those empathy maps and those personas are evolving, based on how the teams are actually working with their stickies and problem solving and adding their comments, and comments are being grouped into synthesized, abstractions, if you will, and then the persona evolution is being done as that process progresses. The third piece that's really important is the self-motivation of the teams and the individuals. And here, they were driven by different levels of motivation. So the youngsters wanted to win the prize, and the SMEs genuinely wanted to solve the problem that had been unsolved up to now.
Fantastic. So walk me through some of the steps that you went through. You had this concept, and then what did the team do first to, develop some kind of working prototype that you could get people's reaction to?
Yeah, so great question. So the empathy maps and the personas are still sort of a bit abstract. They're hard to react to by themselves, because one doesn't have the synthesis of what that means to the look and feel and flow of an app. So the next step from empathy mapping and the persona development is to actually have what is known as wireframes developed. And this is, think of it simply as, if you and I were to take a 8.5 by 11 and divide it into three, put it in a portrait sideways format and divide it into three columns and then tear it, and then put, say 10 of these pages, so 10 times 3, 30 on a table left to right, and literally start drawing up what would screen 1 look like, what would screen 2 look like, draw up in a cartoon fashion, draw up in a, sketchy pictures, graphics, etc. And the different teams, in each of the teams, we had a UX designer that was embedded that would basically take the information from the persona mapping and the empathy mapping and translate it into what a screen could look like based on what's the evidence in the data in the empathy map and the personas, and then co-create that with the team. There's lots of editing, lots of free flow of information and joint collaboration to get this done as a sketchy set of paper that sits on a table left to right. That is, when done, is essentially a graphical rendition of what the screen sets could look like, and a flow as well as to which screen leads from here to there, and what the overall flow is. Now, once that is done, then the UX designers work with the devs to actually put that into a clickable prototype format. And there are tools out there in the market. We can do this very easily in an InVision web app, or we can do it on a mobile app as well with a set of clickable prototype tools. And what you get at the end of that is essentially an app that sits literally on your phone. It's not coming from the Apple Store or the Google Play Store, but it's sitting on a phone, and you can work with it. You can press it. It moves to the next screen. Data entry fields enable you to enter data, and you can react to it. And you can actually give comments saying, I like this, I don't like this, etc. And so that iteration happens as a next set of iterations in the hackathon, and then that eventually leads to sort of a curation of the final output of the hackathon. Now, at this time, none of this is a sprint. All of this is just the hackathon to go from sort of market surveys and segment analysis to the design side of the empathy maps and the persona development to the customer journey development to the wireframes to then a clickable prototype. Once the prototype is played in front of the same set of participants, generally we try and also put it out there in a secure survey to get a broader set of 1,000, 2,000 people in the market react to what this smaller team has done, and then make another set of edits. And only after those set of edits, then we get into the delivery sprints, either weekly sprints or fortnightly sprints, to deliver the product, to actually write the software. Will, are you there?
Yeah, no. Explain this concept to me of the sprint and how that's different from like this, what you hear about Waterfall being contrasted with.
Yeah, so the sprint is the delivery cycle in Agile where the product is being brought to life, and the frequency of the sprint, the cadence, the frequency of the
The person you are calling cannot accept calls at this time.
Hey, Vijay.
Hey, Will, I think I used up my prepaid minutes, so I'm just switching to my Singapore mobile.
Oh,
Can you fix this in the recording, the break?
Yeah, we can take the break out, no problem.
Okay, great. So let me answer your question then. The sprint in Agile is the delivery cadence. So whether it's a 1 week sprint or a 2 week sprint, it's the cadence, the frequency with which you're bringing the product to the market, or at least to a live production environment. When you compare that to Waterfall has a much more extended delivery cycle where typically there's a requirements gathering that could take, depending on the size of the system or the application, a few months. Then there's a high-level design, and there's a low-level design. Then the actual delivery starts, and then there's a unit testing, integration testing, and then a push to production. So typically, could be many factors, 10 to 15x of the sprint cycle. The other difference between sprint and waterfall, and there's two key elements here. One is the pieces of work that are delivered in the sprint are much smaller, and each of them is a working module or a working part of the bigger picture of the software. The second part is that big difference is that in the waterfall approach, you're actually defining requirements to the nth degree of detail for something that you have no clue, how it's actually going to work and translate from requirements into life, into production. So requirements on paper, design again in design tools and in people's heads and on paper, and then the thing that's actually live has a variation between as spec and as built. That deviation and that gap is essentially removed in the Agile framework, because the delivery from idea to working software is highly crushed, is made much more fast. So when you deliver a piece of software or you deliver a module of the software and you get feedback from the market that, well, I like this part, but I don't like that part. I like the journey of approving of the provisional approval, but I do not like your authentication, to be more specific. It's too cumbersome. I don't like the two-factor authentication for reason A, B, C. You can react very quickly to that in an Agile delivery cadence. You can't do that in a waterfall delivery cadence because the setup of each of the steps is much longer, and you don't have that information until the full system is delivered versus pieces of it are delivered.
Got it. Okay, so much longer process. So then once you have gone out and you build something quick, and then you did the survey to 1,000 people to get the reaction to it, what does the Agile process look like to go from there to actually having the business and making it a working actual product?
Yeah, so the first step is setting up squads in terms of, how many squads are you going to have and what is the composition of each squad. In our case, we had, for this specific example, we had 4 squads, and each of the squads had 10 members in them. We had 2 front-end UX UI specialists. We had 3 front-end devs. We had 2 back-end devs. We had a QA, quality assurance engineer or test automation. And then we had one role that spanned across the squads as the senior DevOps engineer, the person that's setting up all the tooling, making sure that the CI/CD pipeline is working, also playing a role of architect, technology architect across all the squads. Now, these squads then worked in an Agile cadence of weekly sprints. And we delivered the features. So we delivered the features in line with what we called epics. So there was an epic for the onboarding of the SME. There was an epic for the provision approval. There was an epic for the collection of documents and the sending out of the mobile banker. And on the retail side, there was an epic for the onboarding of the retail customer. There was a epic for transaction history. There was an epic for the bill split and the ease of use of sharing of payments across the mobile platforms using the phone number, et cetera, et cetera. So based on these epics, then the epics are broken down into stories, and the stories are broken down into story points. Now, that breakdown, so the epic selection, the epic allocation to each epic is allocated to one or more squads based on the competence and the skill sets in the squad. And then once the epic is allocated to the squad, the actual computation of how many the complexity of the stories and the decomposition into story points is done individually by the squad. And that's a strength of Agile, and that's also a weakness. So one of the things we did to make sure that we were bringing to the strength on the Agile side in this case was we made sure that the squad, the full stack developers in each squad were, and these are typically the more experienced developers, that they were following the same principles of complexity in breaking down stories into story points and assessing the complexity with a common sort of lens. So a lot more stand-ups, a lot more communication across squads to make sure that, hey, if I'm counting these 3 screens as 20 story points, that in another squad, 3 equivalent screens are being also counted as 20 story points and not 10, which would make a difference in the velocity and a difference in the perceived output and the real output of each squad.
Fantastic. So Vijay, if folks wanted to learn more about Agile and follow up with you, where would you point them online?
So I can be reached, of course, through Umbrex, where I am one of the independent consultants at Umbrex, and then they can reach me on my LinkedIn page as well. And happy to answer any questions, help with any support, etc. My way of working with Umbrex is through my own little LLC, and that email is Vijay Mehra at d2t2llc.com.
Great. We'll include those links in the show notes. Vijay, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you so much, Will. I've really enjoyed the discussion, and thank you for the opportunity.